The Vixam mast, in conjunction with the two-piece whip antenna, is used with VHF communications when setting up in a static position. Students will wear a helmet and ballistic eyewear or BEWs at all times, and gloves anytime they are hammering or when temperatures are below freezing. The mast must be a minimum of 80 feet from the closest power line. More information can be found in the Handbook Telescopic Mast Kit. The mast kit contains the following: a telescopic tubular mast, a base plate, spooler assemblies, lower guy line with 3 red, middle guy line with 3 white, and upper guy line with 3 blue. 3 pigtail spikes, 3 mod spikes, a radius line of 27 feet of yellow rope, a mallet, the antenna base, coax, and a B and C connector, and the upper and lower antenna pieces. The kit should be inspected for serviceability before the setup begins. Prior to starting the mast setup, a safety check must be completed by the student. Placing the base plate in the location where they want to launch the mast, the student will get the attention of their DS or directing staff and say,
"I have 80 feet above me, clear of electrical hazards and obstructions. I've got 80 feet around me, clear of electrical hazards and obstructions,"
indicating with their arm the direction they are going to place the pigtail spikes.
"I have 27 feet, 27 feet, and 27 feet from my guy lines."
The remainder of the kit must remain in the bag prior to the safety statement. If the base plate needs to be moved during the course of the setup, it must be cleared again with the DS. The base plate for the mast should be as flat as possible on the ground, with no more than a 15-degree angle. The base plate has 3 yellow lines at 120-degree intervals to help with placing the guy lines. The Y should face into the prevailing winds if the ground permits. The 3 mod spikes are driven in at 45-degree angles, facing different directions to lock the base to the ground. The head of each mod spike must be touching the base plate. The pigtails will be equally spaced at 120 degrees around the base plate and 27 feet away from it. They will be driven in at a 45-degree angle away from the mast, leaving approximately 2 inches of clearance between the pigtail's curl and the ground. The red guy lines are run out from the base plate to the pigtails. Using the tensioner, the guy line is tightened to the point where it is snug when pulled to waist height. The mast is now inserted into the base plate. Ensure that the base locking pin is secured and no threads are showing. The red guy lines are moved from the base plate and hooked onto the lowest loops on the mast. The mast must not be left unsupported between its insertion into the base plate and being supported by the red guy lines. The student will try to lift the mast out of the base plate to ensure that it is locked securely. The red guy lines are then tightened, ensuring the mast is perfectly vertical. The red guy lines are used to stabilize and support the entire mast structure. The upper and lower antenna pieces and the antenna base are screwed together and placed on top of the mast. The T-nut is tightened, locking the antenna base in place. The coax is screwed to the bottom of the antenna base with the use of an N-type to BNC adapter. The white guide lines are run out next on the center loops of the mast and loosened all the way. With both the white and blue guide lines, slack is removed from the tensioner, then looped onto the pigtail. The blue guide lines are run out and hooked onto the top loops. The pigtails are hammered into the ground the remaining 2 inches until the bottom of the pigtail is touching the ground.
Master Corporal, permission to raise mast.
Until the students are qualified, they stop at this point and call over their DS to inspect their mast before launching it. If setting up the mast at night, it will need to be cleared using white light from a flashlight or headlights.
Good to go. Okay, carry on the mast.
Once deemed safe, they continue launching the mast. The mast is raised in a hand-over-hand fashion, under control at all times. As each section is raised, mast pins are inserted upside down and rotated downward so they cannot work their way out. Caution must be used so that the pins don't rotate while raising the mast. Assistance may be given to raise the last 2 sections by the second safety student. Taking out the slack on the blue and white guy lines, slip knots are tied between knee and shoulder height. The blue and white guy lines are snugged up to straighten the mast. They are not tightened to the same degree as the red guy lines. The extra line is spooled and tied neatly, not left dangling on the ground. When inspecting the mast, look at it from a distance before walking back to adjust it for straightness and remove any knots in the coax. Look up from the base of the mast on at least 2 sides for straightness as well. Check the mast pins for orientation. Remember, check the position of the mod spikes and pigtails. Check all the guy lines for proper tightness. Upon completing the mast, the student will get the attention of the DS and state that they are conducting a radio check.
Radio check, Master Corporal. Disconnecting coax, Master Corporal.
Before starting teardown, the student will get the attention of the DS and state that they are disconnecting the coax from the radio. Teardown is just the reverse of setup. The mast must be lowered under control, as with raising, and not be allowed to slide through the hands. The coax cable can now be removed from the antenna base and rolled up. Next, remove the antenna assembly from the top of the mast, separating the upper and lower antenna pieces from the antenna base. Leaving the red guy lines attached to keep the mast supported, the blue and white guy lines can be unhooked and extended to full length. Remove any knots before rolling the lines back onto the appropriate reels and setting them near the kit bag. Ensuring the mast is supported, the red guy lines can now be taken off. The mast can be lifted out of the base plate and laid on the ground. The red guy lines can now be rolled back onto the reel and the pigtails removed from the ground. Lastly, the base plate can now be removed and all kit checked for serviceability before being packed into the mast bag.